Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm sharing day 6 of the 12 days of Stitchmas. The 12 days of Stitchmas is an advent calendar that Spellbinder comes up with. There are 12 different windows in there and each one has a stitching die. They're holiday themed, so they're perfect for the upcoming holiday season. I have all the videos from the 12 days of Stitchmas for 2025 in the same playlist. So if you've missed any, you'll find them in the same playlist as this video. So for day 6, we have this adorable little bear with a scarf as well as a snowflake die cut. So one of the things that I love to do with animal die cuts, I don't do this every single time, but often, is I love to use velvet cardstock. It comes in a bunch of different colors, but it's a fun way to add just different texture. And because the bear itself isn't stitched, it's just that stomach piece, I decided to do white velvet for the card or for the base of the bear. So it's an adhesive velvet. I always stick it to a piece of scrap cardstock to give it a little bit more stability, and it sticks really, really nicely. I don't find the adhesive comes off at all. It sticks well and it die cuts really, really nicely. It die cuts just like regular cardstock. So here is that bear. There are some openings for the eyes, the nose, as well as the ears. So I'm going to use my new Lilac Shimmer Tool-in-One to poke out those pieces. There are pieces in this die set to put behind there to color those pieces. So there is kind of a half circle piece that goes behind the eyes and the nose, and then there's a very unique piece that goes behind the ears, and you can tell right away it's for behind the ears just because of the shape of it. So what I like to do to glue them back there is I flip my piece over, add a little bit of the liquid glue. I use Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle, and then I put the piece to cover those holes. This is the easiest way. Rather than putting it on those pieces themselves and getting some glue in those holes, this is the easiest way to do that. So for this particular die set, the stitching pieces are the scarf as well as the stomach. So for the scarf, I'm going to use some red floss. This is number 817 DMC floss, and I'm going to use it so that it looks like the scarf has some stripes to it. If you wanted it to be more subtle, you could use a matching floss, or you could use a metallic floss. That would look fantastic as well. It's really, really easy to do the stitching, and when you use Spellbinder stitching dies, they often put a line or an indent where the stitching is intended to go. So there's very little guesswork to it. It's fairly intuitive, and you know exactly where they intended for it to go. You can still get creative if you want. Like, you could do crisscrosses on here if you wanted to make your stitching detail more elaborate, but you don't necessarily have to. So it makes it really easy for people that are new to stitching dies. Whenever I use stitching dies, I like to, most of the time, die cut that piece twice so that once I'm done my stitching, I can glue that second piece to the back. When it comes to assembling my card, it makes it a lot easier because I'll be gluing cardstock to cardstock and I don't have to worry about that floss. The other thing that I like to do is when I start the stitching, I like to put a little piece of Best Ever Craft tape just to secure the end of that floss, hold it in place, and then when I'm done stitching a piece, I'll do that exact same thing. This is all going to be enclosed inside the piece that I glue behind that. And even if it wasn't, it would be glued to the card base or glued to the other die cut elements to create whatever the image is. So you're never going to see this craft tape, but it just secures it. I don't have to worry about loose floss bits possibly showing on the outside of my die cut piece, or coming loose and having my stitching come loose. I know that it's nice and secure. So once I'm done, I put that little Best Ever Craft tape piece on there. I also use some sewing clips to hold the pieces together that I glue together. This way I can just set that aside to dry while I'm doing more stitching or doing more assembly. I don't have to sit there and hold my pieces to dry. For the stomach, I have a medium brown floss that I'm going to use. This is number 436. So it's just slightly darker than the fawn cardstock, but I wanted it to show up but not be too contrasting. So I did the same thing. I put the floss through one of the holes, used a little bit of Best Ever Craft tape and taped that in place, and then I start doing my stitching. And just like the rest of the stitching dies, these have little lines that radiate around that center hole, showing you exactly where that floss is intended to go. Now, the other thing you could do with this is you could do an extra row of stitching after you do the radiating floss pieces and like kind of line up or do an outline around the stomach here. I don't do that, but that is an extra step that you could do if you wanted even more stitching on here. I don't find it's really necessary, but you absolutely could if you wanted to. The stitching is really, really easy to do, and it comes together really, really quickly. And the nice thing about adding that stitching is it just gives it some extra texture. So not only are we going to have the texture from the velvet from the bear, but you're also going to have texture from those stitching pieces. Now, once they are done stitching and I've glued the pieces to the back, then I can start assembling my bear. But before I do that, I typically like to do something on my background. Often I'll use an embossing folder for my background. It creates some more texture. It's subtle because I don't typically ink that embossed background. I'll typically leave it fairly plain. So it just has that visual texture that kind of goes with whatever theme we're doing. For this particular card, I'm changing it up. For this one, I'm using my Better Press system. I used my Better Press system in the last video to do my sentiments, and I'm going to be using one of those sentiments for this card. But I thought it would be nice to use this Snowfall Shimmer press plate. Last card, I used a Snowfall embossing folder, and that absolutely could be swapped out for this press plate. If you don't have the Better Press system or you don't have this particular plate, you could use a different snowflake stamp or embossing folder for that background. I just thought it worked really, really well with the polar bear. Now I used some silver ink to ink up my press plate. I love the fact that with press plates you can use many different types of inks and cardstocks. If you don't happen to have silver ink, another option would be using Versamark ink and silver embossing powder. You'll have a little bit of dimension with that embossed background, but you'll get a very, very similar look to it. I chose to do my background with mint because it would work well with the fern cardstock for the mat as well as the scarf, but you could easily choose just white cardstock if you wanted, and you could easily use a brown velvet cardstock for the bear. I thought a white one would look nice for winter, but brown would look great as well. I think I'd really, really dark color brown. You might lose some of the detail from the bear, but they come in so many different colors, you can get really creative with it. So once I have my background done and glued those pieces onto the base of the card, I'm ready to add the stitched pieces to the front of my bear. So I just use that same Bearly Art glue to glue everything together. I do let it sit for a few extra moments there because we're gluing it to velvet cardstock, and it does glue just fine, but it takes just a little bit longer than regular cardstock to start setting because that velvet wants to absorb that glue first, and then it will start to dry. My mat, my fern mat, is trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. My snowflake background is trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. The last thing on this card is some snowflakes that are die cut out of that snowflake die that is in this set from day 6. I have die cut it out of white glitter cardstock. This is from the Antique White Treasured cardstock pack. I like the glitter for snowflakes. It just adds that extra little bit of texture as well. I die cut 5 snowflakes. I glued down 3 of them full, and then the last 2 I cut in half so that the snowflakes are kind of half on, half off that printed background. It just looks a little bit better when you have an image or something on your background going off of it. Whether it's going off of it the entire die cut so it goes into the mat, or you cut it down and have it like this. So here is the finished card that has so much texture and so much interest to it. So we have the velvet cardstock for the bear. We have those stitching elements for the scarf as well as the stomach. Then we have those silver snowflakes in the back, and they're really subtle, but they just fit in with the theme. I also added one of those Better Press sentiments from the last video, and then my glitter snowflakes. Thank you so much for joining me for day 6 of the 12 days of Stitchmas. I'll be back tomorrow and share day 7.